Yo, what's going on, everyone? MXM, and today we're going to be talking about the node system in Ashes of Creation. This video has been coming up for a little while and took a little bit of research to complete this. And because of this sheer size and detail of the node system, we're going to cover this subject in two videos. Like, it's insanely huge. If you go check out the wiki page, you'll see the amount of information that I'm trying to condense in these videos for you. The link to the wiki will be in the description below as well if you want to check it out yourself. So before we get started, I want to get that out of the way. So in this first video, we're going to be covering the basic principles of the node system. So that is the node types, their zone of influences, how that mechanic works, the node advancement, the node development, and the node location, because the node locations vary and then how this develops the node, etc, etc. It's a really nice and in-depth system. So all the other subjects that you might find on the wiki we'll cover in the next video, making sure this video doesn't get too long and you guys don't get thrown to death with like bunches of information. So let's start with the basics of the node system. Nodes will be the backbone of the world in which Ashes of Creation is set. So a good testament of that is that there will be 103 regular nodes and 15 castle nodes in the entire world. All these nodes will cover the entire world. They will be overlapping each other. There will be no tiny speck left unturned where there won't be a node. So because of that abundance and such, nodes will be dictating the ebb and flow of the game. This is going to be the core gameplay mechanic. Everything is going to be revolving around nodes mostly. Nodes allow you access to different PvE and also generating PvP, which we'll both be covering in the next video. So once you got the general introduction out of the way, we're going to be jumping into the four types of nodes that we have. So we have divine nodes, economic nodes, military nodes, and scientific nodes. The focus of each node is given away, of course, by their name, and does each type of node excels at a different aspect. What's important to know is that a node type is static and will not change throughout the world. So once something is a divine node, it will always stay a divine node. It can't turn into an economic node, just like a military one can't change into a scientific node, etc, etc. Furthermore, the node types are identical across all servers, so server hopping to get a different composition of nodes currently is not possible. I don't know if they're going to change this. I personally would love to see if it's more varying and flexible. And there's Chewy that you hear right there. It's my hamster. He's going ham on some toilet paper roll right there. But okay, so server hopping makes no sense to do. It's going to be exact same everywhere. So the node type influences a couple of things inside the node. These are the node type of government they influence, the narrative of the node, so the NPCs that you can find inside the node, the quests most likely, node buildings, and amenities. So amenities means like cosmetics, how things look, etc, etc. So this is all influenced by the type of node. Each node will also have special benefits. Currently the divine node benefits are unknown to us, so I'll make a new video if these become known to us at a later date. I will make a specific video covering these to supplement this current video. The economic node that reaches the state of metropolis, the stage will cover a little later down the line. Almost got tongue twisted there. Are able to be linked economically to other economic metropolises. So that means you get like a trade network set up between economic metropolises, which is going to be very interesting because this allows the player to list items in both cities as at once. So if you want to sell something in one metropolis that's economically linked to another one, your sell offer will be listed at both cities at the same time. Furthermore, economic metropolises allow the player to auction items throughout the world of Vera. So you can auction items anywhere you want. It's basically like a auction house system, kind of like in World of Warcraft, where people inside the world will be able to buy your auction. And lastly, when an economic metropolis is linked with another node, then vassals are linked as well. So we're going to be diving into the vassal system a little later down the line. But basically, it allows for huge trade networks to be set up between economic metropolises. That's the important aspect here. The military nodes enable bounty hunters, so people that will hunt people that got corruption, but also people that are in a corruption state will have the amount of time they are in this state reduced. So the corruption is an anti-grieving mechanic. We'll cover that in a later video as well once we start covering the PvP system. But basically what it means, if people aren't flagged for PvP and you kill them or they're way lower level than you, you will get corruption, which will give you debuffs, etc, etc. Then the last node that we'll be covering is the scientific node. A scientific node allows for teleportation once it reaches the metropolis state. So how this works is teleportation will be possible between the metropolis and its vassals. So as long as these aren't at war, so you can't teleport around if the vassals or your metropolis is in a state of war. However, if you're at peace, you're allowed to jump around in between the vassal state and the metropolis nodes. If there's more scientific nodes, an airship will enable quick transfer in between these nodes, kind of like the World of Warcraft like airship between the Undercity and Ogrimmite, I guess you could say. That type of deal it's gonna be. The node type also influences the type of government and how mayors are elected, but more on this in the next video as well. So next up is the zone of influence. So the zone of influence mechanic is quite an important one to understand, since it lies at the core of the node system and dictates the ebb and flow of the game. Every single node has a zone of influence. It's basically a circle that runs around the node and just shows its influence. Activities within a node zone of influence like questing, gathering and raiding adds to the node's advancement. When a node advances, its zone of influence increases in size as well. What is important to note is, as well is that there will be no gaps in between nodes their zone of influence, covering the entire world in a blanket of zones of influence. That's a lot of zones of influence right there. So, as was mentioned, activity within zones of influence contribute to a node's progression. There are 7 node stages, being Wilderness, Expedition, Encampment, Village, Town, City, and Metropolis being the final stage. Advancing a node also unlocks a node-specific content. However, there won't be a stage where all nodes will have reached the stage of Metropolis. When a node has reached the maximum level, the surrounding nodes are unable to manage that level and will be able to be a city at the largest. Thus, if you want to access new PvE content, for instance, you will need to destroy the current metropolis and have another node take its place. But more on this in the next video, where we'll be covering node sieges and how this influences the world around you. One way the limit of node advancement becomes clear is the vassal system. So the vassal system basically means that nodes that have reached the stage number 3, which is the village stage, are able to enslave other nodes that are one level below their nodes. And once this process has taken place, the vassal node will always remain one stage below the parent node. It can't match or go above the parent node. The vassal node will also provide any excess XP to their parent node. So if the vassal has reached the cap of the 3rd stage, but the parent node still is in the 4th stage, all excess XP will go to the parent node. Vassal nodes, however, are not allowed to have their own vassals, so you can have like a huge vassal network, like the metropolis having a city as a vassal, a city having a town as a vassal, a town having a village or as a vassal, etc, etc. You can go really fucking deep with this. So yeah, creating a small web of vassalage is more like around a metropolis late game. So like an example is going to be popping up on screen right now, showing how this web will probably look like later in game. Lastly, vassals are bound in almost all regards to their parent node, mostly in the form of government, taxes, diplomacy, and trade. Now, what is also important to note is that all nodes will start at stage 0 once the wars launch, meaning that every server or world will develop completely differently from one another, allowing us, the players, to completely shape the world to our likings. Nodes also develop on a couple of factors, depending on a couple of factors, sorry. The first factor is the location of the node. So we'll go more into depth on the location a little later, but this is just for the example. So a coastal node will develop differently from non-coastal nodes. If you can imagine, a coastal node will most likely develop with a harbour, etc, etc. The node type also plays an importance in the development. As we mentioned earlier on, a military node will look aesthetically different from a divine node, and economic differently from a scientific one, etc, etc. Lastly, the race that contributes most to the development of a node will have their own race aesthetic being more dominant in the node. So if you have like a guild of orcs that works a lot on one specific node, it will look more orcish. If you have a bunch of elves that will work on a node, it looks more elvish, etc, etc. So that's really cool that we, once again, as the player, you can have like influence on how a node looks like based off how much time and effort you, your guild or your race puts inside of a node. And lastly, the mayor of the node also has influence on how the node takes shape, because the mayor is able to place buildings and decide where and how they're being built inside the node. So this also basically moves around how the node looks like. So the last subject we will be covering in this video will be the node location. So nodes can be located in several areas. Most nodes will probably be landlocked, which means that they got no access to the sea or in the middle of the world. However, this is not true for all the nodes, as there will be island nodes and coastal nodes, which will allow for different content. An example of this is the access to harbours, shipbuilding, and special quest lines related to seafaring. Another node type that will be in the game are the Underrealm nodes. These nodes are located underground and do not share their zones of influences with nodes that are on the surface. Caravans will go underground because of this, and Metropolis will be able to form underground. Besides these two aspects, it appears that Underrealm nodes are pretty much identical to their non-Underrealm cousins, and thus everything like the sieges, etc. will be taken to place in the same fashion. There will also be buildings that can spawn underwater, however these are not nodes and there will be no underwater nodes in the game, so this is very important to note. So this covers the first version of the node guide. We're going to be going in more depth in the next video. So we'll be going over player housing, node citizenship, node sieges, node government, caravans, and other small aspects of the node system which are listed on the wiki. There's going to be a more like of short cuts, etc, etc, less general information, more specific information. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for future content. If you think this was helpful, please leave a comment as well. If there's anything you would like to see different, also make sure to leave a comment so I can improve the content for you guys. And lastly, have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.